The woman at the back of the first-class line carried one bag and no expression worth reading. That was what Harold Beckett noticed first, not the coat, charcoal wool, well kept, not the boarding pass folded in her left hand, but the face. Composed in a way that costs something. The kind of calm that isn't peace, it's practice. Harold had been a chaplain for 31 years, 22 of them in uniform. He knew that face. He was 3 people behind her in the priority lane at Hartwell's Terminal B, Gate 14, a Tuesday morning in November, 9 days after Veterans Day. The line moved briskly. A man in a golf shirt waved through. A woman with a roller bag waved through. The couple ahead of Harold waved through. Then the woman with the charcoal coat stepped up to the podium, offered her boarding pass, and the world paused. Not visibly. Not dramatically. The agent, a man in his mid-40s, badge reading Craig, the particular bearing of someone who has decided that rules are the only power he'll ever hold, took the pass, scanned it, and his expression changed. A pinch between the brows. A deliberate second look. Then a third. "This seat," he said, "is in first class." "Yes," the woman said. The word was a complete sentence. Nothing attached to it, no nerves, no apology, no performing of innocence. Harold noticed Craig noticed, and did not like it. "Can I see your ID?" She produced it. Craig studied it the way a man studies a thing he has already decided is wrong and is searching for the proof. His eyes moved between the card and the pass, card and pass, and then he set them both on the counter and leaned slightly forward. "This booking," he said, "was made by someone named James A. Osei. My husband." "And where is he?" The pause that followed was not long. Harold would count it later, in the dark of the flight, as perhaps 3 seconds. But in those 3 seconds the woman drew one breath and looked Craig in the eye and said, very quietly, "He passed in August." Craig did not flinch. "I understand that, ma'am. But I can't verify that this is your ticket. It is a first-class seat booked in my husband's name as a gift for our 30th anniversary. His name was Colonel James A. Osei, United States Army. He booked this flight 10 months ago and he did not live to take it." She did not raise her voice. She did not lower it either. "What is the verification procedure?" It was a precise question. It gave Craig exactly 1 lane to walk down, tell her the procedure, run it, and let her through. Craig chose a different lane. "I'm going to need you to step aside, ma'am. I'll have someone assist you at the service desk." His hand moved, not touching her, but gesturing, indicating the coach line the way a man indicates an exit. "There are other passengers waiting." Harold Beckett had spent 3 decades in rooms where silence is a form of consent. He was done with silence. He stepped out of the line. "Excuse me," he said. His voice carried the low, unhurried register of a man who has spoken at gravesides and in field hospitals and has learned not to waste volume. "I've been standing behind this woman for 4 minutes. I watched you wave 11 passengers through without a second look. I'd like to understand what procedure she specifically failed to meet." Craig looked at him the way men look at things that inconvenience their certainty. "Sir, this is between." "I know what it's between," Harold said. "I'm asking you to name the procedure." Behind Harold, the line was still. No one was checking their phones. The woman, he did not know her name yet, turned slightly. She looked at him the way people look at things they did not expect. Then she looked back at Craig and said, "I have documentation." She reached into her carry-on. What she produced was not a printout, not a screenshot, not a digital confirmation on a cracked screen. It was an envelope. White, standard, the kind issued to commissioned officers for personal correspondence. In the upper left corner, a printed return address. Below it, handwritten, Col. James A. Osei, RET. She set it on the counter beside her boarding pass without a word. Craig stared at it. "The booking confirmation is inside," she said. In his handwriting. He printed the itinerary and wrote the seat assignment in the margin. He wanted me to have something to hold. A pause so brief Harold nearly missed it. "I have something to hold." The supervisor came from somewhere behind the podium, a woman, early 50s, iron gray hair, the practiced walk of someone who has been doing this since before Craig was hired. She had been watching. Her name tag read Patricia. She picked up the boarding pass. She picked up the ID. She looked at the envelope without touching it. Something moved across her face, not sentiment, not yet, but recognition. Then she reached under the counter and ran the pass again on a secondary scanner. The screen showed green. Seat 2A. Confirmed. Paid in full. James A. Osei, 10 months prior. +1, designated beneficiary, Nadine O. Osei. Patricia set both cards down. She looked at Craig. The look was not theatrical. It was the administrative equivalent of a door closing. "Sir," she said, "I need you to step back to the desk." And then, to Nadine, "Mrs. Osei. I am sorry for the delay. You are confirmed in 2A. Let me walk you to the jetway." Craig said something. Harold did not catch it, only the tone, which was the tone of a man beginning to understand that the ground has shifted and still trying to pretend it hasn't. Patricia did not respond to the tone. She said, "The desk, Craig," and her voice had the measured weight of someone who has been keeping a log. Harold Beckett had one thing left to do. He turned to the line behind him. 14 people. A few still on phones, but most of them watching. A man in a navy cap. A young woman with a red backpack. An older couple who had been holding hands since Harold first noticed them and were still holding hands now. This woman, Harold said, not loudly, is the widow of Colonel James Osei, U.S. Army, retired. She has been traveling to honor an anniversary trip her husband planned before he died. She presented valid documentation and was treated as a suspect. He paused. "I want you to know that, because some things should be witnessed." He was not a speechmaker. He was done in 11 seconds. He had not raised his voice. He had not accused Craig of anything. He had named what he saw, said it was worth witnessing, and stopped. He had been in enough rooms to know that the speech that goes 2 sentences too long loses the room, the speech that stops on time gives the room something to carry. The man in the navy cap took off his hat. The older couple, still holding hands, nodded once, a single, quiet beat, like an amen. The young woman with the red backpack said, not quite under her breath, "That's right." No one in the line moved toward the podium. No one needed to. The podium had already answered for itself. Nadine Osei, at the entrance to the jetway, stopped. She turned back toward the gate. For a moment she looked at the line, at Harold, at the men with the hat in his hands, at the couple, and her face did the thing it had been refusing to do for 20 minutes at a hostile podium. Not grief exactly. Something older and quieter than grief. Acknowledgement. She said, "Thank you." 2 words, to no one and to all of them. Then she walked down the jetway to seat 2A. Harold took 3C. He always took 3C. He did not speak to Nadine on the flight. That was not his place. He had said what needed saying, anything further would have been for his own comfort, and he was too old to confuse the two. He read. He dozed. Somewhere over the mountains he looked across the aisle and 2 rows forward and saw the charcoal coat folded in the overhead bin and Nadine Osei sitting straight, hands in her lap, looking at something through the window that was not the clouds. He thought about James Osei, a man he had never met, who had booked a first-class seat 10 months before he knew he would not be in it. Who had printed the itinerary and written the seat assignment in the margin by hand. Who had put it in an envelope so his wife would have something to hold. There was a particular kind of soldier Harold had known across 3 decades, not the ones who wore their courage loudly, not the ones who needed the room to see them, but the ones who did the work quietly and spent their off hours planning small dignities for the people they loved. A weekend trip. A particular restaurant. A first-class seat on a November flight because she always wanted the window and he had learned, somewhere across 30 years of marriage, that wanting the window is not a small thing. James Osei had been that kind of soldier. Harold was certain of it. He could not have told you how he knew. Harold had spent 31 years trying to understand what it meant to serve. He thought he understood it a little better at 34,000 feet on a Tuesday in November. At the gate, Patricia had pulled Craig from duty within 4 minutes of Nadine walking the jetway. The incident was logged, as all flagged incidents were, in the airline's internal conduct system. Patricia had been keeping informal notes on Craig's podium behavior for 3 months, a pattern of extended document reviews applied to passengers of color that she had flagged once in writing and twice in conversation and had been told was a training issue, not a conduct issue. The logged incident from Gate 14 became the fourth entry in a formal complaint filed with Hartwell's regional director of customer operations before the plane reached cruising altitude. By the time the flight landed, the regional director had reviewed the gate footage. Craig was placed on administrative leave pending an HR review. He was not fired that day. The process was what it was. But the review was opened, and the footage was preserved, and Patricia's 3 months of notes were formally entered into the file. These things have weight. They accumulate. The regional director also ordered a 30-day audit of boarding pass verification practices at Terminal B, specifically, the rate at which extended manual reviews were applied by agent and by passenger. The audit would take longer than 30 days. What it found would take longer still to act on. But it was opened, and in Harold's experience, the things that are opened do not always close the way the people who open them expect. Hartwell's district VP called Patricia personally to thank her. Patricia accepted the call and said 2 things, that the thanks belonged to the passenger in 3C who had refused to stay quiet, and that she would like the results of the audit on her desk when they were complete. The VP agreed to both. Nadine did not know most of this when she landed. What she knew, the gate agent had been removed from the podium. A supervisor had apologized. A stranger in a chaplain's collar had stepped out of the line and asked, plainly and without theater, for the rule to be named, and when it could not be named, the rule had collapsed. And she had sat in 2A. James had picked 2A because it was the window seat and she always wanted the window. He had picked this flight because it left at a decent hour and arrived before dinner. He had planned to have champagne and to let her sleep on his shoulder and to be somewhere warm by nightfall. He had planned all of it 10 months before August, which meant he had planned it before he knew there would be an August like that one. Or maybe he had known. James had always been a planner. He had always been, in the particular and private way of men who have seen the worst their century had to offer and chosen tenderness anyway, someone who wanted the people he loved to have something to hold. She held the envelope through the whole flight. She did not open it. She had opened it once, in September, and that was enough. She knew what it said. She knew his handwriting. She knew the seat number he had written in the margin, the small circle that he'd drawn next to the window icon, the note at the bottom in his careful hand, "First class, baby. You've always been." The mountains moved below her. The light changed. She had something to hold. When the plane touched down and the cabin stirred and the men in 3C stood to retrieve his bag from the overhead bin, he paused. She was still seated. He did not speak. He simply reached up, retrieved her carry-on as well as his own, and set it in the aisle beside her. She looked up at him. "Colonel Osei," Harold said, because there was nothing else to say and he knew soldiers, sounds like he was a good man. Nadine Osei looked at him for a moment. Then she said, "He was the best man I ever knew." Harold Beckett nodded, picked up his bag, and walked off the plane. The cabin, emptying around her, was quiet. Not the quiet of people being careful. The quiet of people who had heard something true and did not want to cover it with noise. Nadine stood. She put on the charcoal coat. She picked up the envelope and tucked it into the inside pocket, where it rested against her chest. Then she walked off the plane into the bright terminal, carrying what she'd always carried, only lighter now, because a room full of strangers had seen it, and one man had refused to look away, and the seat her husband had chosen for her had held her safe and steady all the way home.